when you're being authentic, a lot of the things that really fit you naturally get drawn towards you. That's because your authenticity is this sort of attracting and repelling force. When you're really actually just being yourself, you start to build a life that is actually aligned with your psychology, your needs, your preferences, your desires, your wants, your goals, your values, etc. When you're interacting with people in an authentic way, you start to attract people who fit your energy. They fit your preferences. They fit your psychology, etc. So I want to talk about this idea of authenticity and start to give you some more clarity on what this really is. What does it actually even mean to be authentic? What is authenticity? And how do I actually be it in my life? You see, most people don't have the self-awareness to understand that they can be anything other than authentic. So they automatically start with the assumption that, I'm just being me, I'm being authentic. But it's really not as simple as that. And a core reason as to why it's not that simple is because growing up, we're not really taught at all how to really feel safe and comfortable expressing yourself in a truthful and honest way. Instead, we're kind of just taught to conform to a cultural consciousness, cultural system, right? A sort of value system, a sense of self, a sense of identity, an overall level of consciousness and behaviors that kind of go with that. We're taught to sit very still and for long periods of time in, let's say, the classroom setting. We're told to not express ourselves in certain ways. And quickly, we have to kind of just start to conform to this kind of stuff because we don't really know what else to do as children. You see, a child is extremely sensitive to the emotional atmosphere that they're growing up in. They have a very sensitive nervous system, and all they're really able to kind of detect is like, I need to figure out how to get my needs met so I can survive, which often involves getting the approval of people in positions of authority and power over them, like teachers, parents, anyone in a position like that. But typically for the average person, this means parents and teachers. So in order to basically get that approval, you have to fit into this kind of box. You have to fit into a certain category that is that people are going to approve of. And when you're outside of that category, people disapprove of you, and that's a very painful feeling, right? Disapproval and rejection is extremely painful for humans because in ancestral times, if we were rejected by our group, that meant potentially being ostracized and kicked out of the group, which essentially just meant death. So of course, there's a lot of pain that comes with acting in a kind of way that gets you rejected. So the child doesn't really know any better. They just kind of start picking up a whole bunch of stuff from culture, and the child in this case is you. I want you to really relate this to your own personal life. You start picking up things from culture, your household, your school, etc., that don't actually really fit you. They're not really authentic to you. They're not really like derived by you. A lot of it is kind of just restrictive, not true, unhealthy, dysfunctional, etc. And this actually kind of just prevents you from really being your authentic self, feeling safe being as you are, feeling safe expressing yourself, feeling safe just like having, the hand motions that you want to do, right? Even like the gestures, just feeling safe to do this kind of stuff, whatever it is that you spontaneously and very naturally and organically want to do. So essentially, we can say this traumatizes us, and the word trauma is a fairly dramatic word, although it's very appropriate for this, but I don't want you to sort of walk away from this thinking that, it's like extremely super damaging. It is, but it's healable. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to use just the word, it's healable. All right, so how do you actually start to be more authentic? This is an incredibly hard thing to answer, especially when you don't really have the awareness that you can be anything other than authentic. Because how it typically seems like to a lot of people is that I'm kind of just living my life, and this is kind of just who I am. When in actuality, no, that's not really what's going on. You're, in many cases, acting from all these kinds of tensions in the bodies and overall protective mechanisms that you've built up over the first 10, 20 years, really 20 years of your life. And you're just kind of acting from that. And a lot of those core, most natural, organic impulses, instincts, desires, ways of expressing yourself, a lot of that kind of just starts to go under the surface because you don't feel safe enough to express it. You were indirectly or directly told throughout your life that it was bad, that you shouldn't do that. Directly, meaning that, you were very like, yeah, that was bad, you can't do that. And indirectly, as in being disapproved of, being sort of looked at in a strange way, people raising their tone of voice when you're doing something, right? More like subconscious ways that we just kind of instinctually pick up. So how do you really begin to be more authentic? I think a core part of really starting this is the realization that you're not authentic. It's a pain in the ass to swallow, but it's very accurate for probably most people on this planet. The realization that a lot of what I do isn't authentic is probably the best place to really start. The reason why is because it's honest. And I don't want you to start overthinking and overanalyzing and over-questioning every single thing, because that doesn't really help either. When it comes to being more authentic, there's a lot of principles that I want you to start following. And these principles will start to guide you in the direction of authenticity. So really, this is a very hands-on kind of project. In order to be more authentic, you're going to have to take a lot of the ideas and principles that I'm going to be saying in this video, start applying them to your life, and then just noticing what really fits in a very instinctual way, in some kind of way that just feels right. And it's kind of hard to really communicate that idea I just said of it feeling right. But again, you kind of have to play around with it for yourself, because there's this distinct feeling to really being authentic, to being grounded inside yourself, to standing your ground, to expressing yourself in a way that's truthful to you. There's a very distinct feeling to being authenticity that you're going to have to learn to kind of tune into. And a really good way to start doing that is through mindfulness meditation, learning to just watch your emotions, to feel them, to be more in the body. This is actually highly essential for really being authentic. So I want you to kind of just contemplate some of these principles when it comes to being authentic and how important they really are. So the first one is presence. And without presence, and this kind of ties into my second one actually, which I'll kind of just lump them together, living within the body and feeling safe in the body. Without being able to be present in this experience, to be grounded in the body, you can't really be authentic because you're fundamentally disconnected from the experience. You're not really living within it. In order to be authentic, you have to be living within your experience, not within a fantasy, not trying to escape it or avoid it, but learning how to actually just kind of settle into it. A lot of people experience their body as this kind of like object of their experience. Like it's not me, it's something like other than me. And once you really learn how to inhabit the body, that kind of begins to flip on its head. Rather than you kind of seeing, your body and kind of perceiving it as like this object and you're kind of like this floating head, you start to actually feel at home in your body. You start to actually feel more like who you actually are. You start to actually befriend it. Your nervous system gets out of fight, flight, freeze, and you naturally start to have the confidence and the feeling of safety to kind of just express yourself in a very truthful way. So I also want to define authenticity I'm going to repeat that. I want to define authenticity before I actually move forward. So authenticity is simply expressing yourself in a way that is truthful and honest and in integrity with you. So moving on, it actually kind of ties into my last point, is self-awareness. You need to actually have the self-awareness to recognize when I'm not being authentic. And that capacity to actually call yourself out. And I really love this idea of calling yourself out, actually being your own whistleblower, calling yourself out on your own bullshit. No, that wasn't authentic. I was being a bit too much kind of just conforming, or I was being a people pleaser. I was too scared in that moment, not in a critical way, right? Not in a self-attacking way, but in a way where it's like you're not letting your mind kind of like slip through the cracks with this one. Like you're just seeing what's really going on. You're seeing it and you're just calling it out. You're bringing it to your awareness as much as you possibly can. So that ties in with honesty as well, which is one of my next ones, and transparency, which is when you're not being authentic, learning to just call yourself out. Again, not in an attacking way, but try and leave the feeling of this very open, not very closed, intense, and rigid, but just leaving the feeling of it open, right? Of just, oh, that wasn't very authentic of me, right? Or I was just people pleasing, right? Or like I was sacrificing myself too. I was overgiving because I was actually afraid of disapproval. So it's like you're just trying to be very honest to yourself about what you're actually doing. Integrity is a core part of this, and all this stuff really has to be practiced. Like in order to actually have integrity, you have to practice calling yourself out for your own bullshit. The human mind is a very self-deceptive system. It likes to deceive itself in order to further its agenda for survival purposes. And in order to actually be authentic, you have to be aware of these sort of self-deceptions. You have to start kind of cracking down on this. Because again, if authenticity is more aligned with a truthful way of being, and self-deception is of course the exact opposite, it's lies essentially, it's deceiving. Of course, like in order to move towards truth, we have to move away from self-deception. Another core part is just empathy. Empathy for yourself and empathy for others. There's this sort of resonance that happens when you're empathetic, even towards your own pain, your own struggles, and towards other people. There's a feeling of it simply being right. Like this is just a fantastic human quality that very deeply aligns with any single very healthy human being. Empathy just kind of comes naturally. Care for others naturally begins to arise. A feeling of connection to others naturally begins to arise. All this stuff is just kind of intuited as correct. There's a deeper feeling of it, again, being right, that you have to learn to attune to for yourself. It's kind of below the threshold of language because we're dealing with like sensation, emotion, and like ever-changing sort of dynamics and flows in our experience and in our body. So again, it's like language doesn't really quite capture some of this stuff very well. But for some reason, when you're able to have empathy, there's just a shift. There's like a click of like, this feels healthy. Like this feels very good. Another core part that really aligns with everything I just said is vulnerability. So being able to kind of let go of those protective shields, right? And be vulnerable. It fits into that framework that I just said a second ago, of it just simply feeling right. Because essentially, when you're not vulnerable and you're acting out of protection, there's this sort of subtle like agitation going on, this subtle sort of fight against reality that's going on, and it doesn't really feel very good. So when you're able to kind of be vulnerable, assuming that you're actually in a safe environment and surrounded by safe people, again, there's just this feeling of this is the right thing to do. It's very right-brained, right? It's not very logical, left-brained, analyzing it piece by piece, putting it into a math equation. That's not really how this one works. It's very right-brained, intuitive, emotional, pure awareness, pure witnessing, non-conceptual. This is really the kind of stuff you have to tap into to really get a deeper idea of authenticity. Courage is another one, because this is hard work, to be quite honest. When you're going through years of like fear of really expressing yourself, it's hard. You're going to need courage to actually express yourself, which is again a thing to practice. You're going to have to continuously practice being courageous and like fully inhabiting your own body, not making yourself small, not over giving to people out of fear, being able to like set a boundary when it's right and then let go of that boundary again when it's right, not being rigid with it. again, it's kind of just like having the courage to even just assert yourself into the world and to fully inhabit who you are as a human being in this world. Again, a lot of people in the whole spiritual domain, they think the ego is this horrible, evil, bad thing, but it's more of like a tool that, when it's actually a healthy ego, it's more of a tool that the flow of life kind of uses to actually express itself. So by fully grounding into your human self, you actually also come across the very nature of being, which is a video for another day. Just thought I'd throw that in there. So my next one kind of ties in with empathy, and it's compassion, kind of just like learning to open up the heart to yourself and to other people, and actually feeling into the heart space and detecting, like, is it numb, is it contract, is it tense, or does it actually feel open? Do I feel a quality of love happening in my heart space? And of course, we've all experienced this, assuming that maybe you've like fallen in love with anything whatsoever. There's that pure feeling of love in the heart, which you can actually wire yourself in such a way so that is like a lasting experience, that it doesn't kind of feel numb or tense or contracted or shut down. And it's a core part of being authentic is learning to just like open the heart and actually sense into that, because that quality of love in the heart, or power in the gut, or sexuality in your genital region, or the quality of your own voice, or the intelligence of your own mind, these pure subjective felt qualities are authentic to you. They're not something you have to invent or make up. They're already existing there, and you kind of just have to learn how to tap into them, and that's kind of it, and really start embodying them. Curiosity is another important point. Again, you need to have this sort of right-brained approach in mind, where it's not just about pure logic, although I love logic and the left brain and all that stuff, but it needs to be well balanced with the right brain as well. Curiosity works because when you're curious, again, it kind of opens up the feeling of experience, the energy of experience, and you want to kind of just like keep it open, right? You want to have that sort of open ability to inquire, and then if there's details or something, you kind of laser in on it and kind of have this ability to just kind of go back and forth. You want to just allow yourself to remain open. That's a very core part of being authentic, is being, again, open to the present experience, not shut down or closed from it, which again ties into one of my first points. Of course, things like physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being matter as well, and raising your consciousness. The more well you actually are, the more conscious you become, the easier it actually is to really be authentic. And again, tying this back to the beginning of the video, it attracts what you actually really want in your life. It attracts the things that actually fit well with you, kind of like a puzzle piece. You know how puzzle pieces kind of just fit in perfectly? When you're not aligned, it's like you're just, it's wrong. Like the puzzle piece, like they don't fit together, right? You're not, it's wrong, okay? Like I don't have to explain it too much, I hope. And then when you're actually authentic, you're really aligned with yourself. You start to naturally fit in with environments, people, etc., who resonate with that. They resonate with yourself, your values, the felt experience of what it's like to be you, your level of consciousness, your psychology, your personality type, things like this. You start to naturally get pulled towards that stuff, and again, it just simply feels right. Really attuned to that feeling of like it just fits well, like bread and butter. It's hard to really put that one into total sort of language, but it's almost like sitting up straight. There's something, it feels off to just kind of sit, and it's like slouched, whereas when you're like up straight, it just feels like the body's aligned. There's a deeper, especially if you practice a lot of meditation, there's a deeper ability to be like open and mindful. There's a deeper sort of like feeling that arises that you kind of have to learn to pay attention to. So again, when you're really living in alignment with yourself and being authentic, naturally you find yourself kind of gravitating towards things that actually fit with you, and the things that don't, you start to repel them because you're really grounded in yourself and your values, and you have the courage to say no or to leave something and then go to where you really feel called to go. That's it for this video. If you're interested in working with me one-to-one, you can apply to do so. Link is in the pinned comment. Take it easy.